Oh, me. And I say that, oh, me, because recently I went back and I watched a lot of my old videos. And I didn't have just like a whole lot. I may have had another YouTube that I forgot about, probably. Whatever the case is, pretty much like the end of last year and like the beginning of this year, I started really getting rid of a lot of social media. And like I got rid of, TikTok, Facebook, all that, And I actually do feel better for it. I hadn't been watching YouTube or been doing anything on YouTube really for like quite a while. I'm not really sure how long. I just kind of got out of doing YouTube. I think when TikTok came around, I was kind of like, well, what's the point of YouTube, TikTok is quicker. Whatever the case is, I don't have any of that stuff anymore. But I was watching some of my old videos recently and just listening to my old self, is just, I was reflecting and thinking about all the things that have changed since my last video, which was like 6 years ago or something like that. I'm not really sure. Like, I'm not in the same place. I'm not the same person. A lot has happened since then. Like, I was living with my dad then. I have my own place finally. And I have for a few years. And I don't have fat stuff anymore. Unfortunately, she passed away. She was about 12 or 13 years old. Casper passed away suddenly, like about 4 or 5 years ago. And then Todd passed away a couple of years ago. Right before Casper died, I had adopted a rescue bunny named Binks. And literally, like a week or 2 weeks after I got him, I think Casper died in my arms. But anyways, I am down to one fur baby, Binks. Also, my dad passed away in May of this year. So, that's also changed. My mom almost died. Well, I mean, technically she did die, but they brought her back. May 13th. My mom died. They brought her back. She went to the emergency room. My mom had been sick for quite a while, and nobody had been listening to her. The doctors weren't listening. They weren't paying attention. And she just kept getting worse. And one day, my dad called me while I was at work on May 13th. And it was just a couple of days after Mother's Day. And I went up to the emergency room and everything. My sister was there, my dad was there, and it was really busy that day. Like, really busy. Like, people coming in, ambulances. It was just chaotic. And I really thought my mom was going to die. Like, right in front of me. But, thankfully she didn't. She got transferred to a different hospital where they could take better care of her because our local hospital just doesn't have everything that they need. So, anyways, I hung out with my dad the next day, and I was trying to convince him to like take me to go see my mom in the hospital because I didn't want to drive the distance because driving, in bigger cities makes me nervous. It gives me anxiety. And also, I just didn't want to go alone. I wanted him to go with me. Like, my parents hadn't been, they'd been divorced for, it hadn't been 10 years. I want to say about like 7 or 8 years maybe, but they still loved each other. They started out as friends, they ended as friends. And my dad was there with her that day at the hospital, and he held her hand, and I was the only other one in the room that got to see, him hold her hand and reassure her and let her know that he was there. And then, like, the next day, I talked to him on the phone, and we had hung out a little bit that afternoon. And I remember, my other sister was in another state. Like, her job takes her all over the place. And she wasn't feeling good either. And then when she got the news of my mom, she decided to come back, And I was telling my dad, like, she's on her way back. She'll be back today. And You know, like, I want to go see my mom. I want to be there for my mom, but I want to be there for my sister too. You know, like, I don't know what to do. And he was like, okay, well, why don't you stay, you know, with your sister today, and then y'all can go see your mom tomorrow. And I was like, okay, you know, that works. And I hung out with him, you know, for a little bit. And then when I was getting ready to go home, you know, I gave him a really big hug and I squeezed him, you know, and I told him something along the lines of, you know, I love you so much. Like, I hope you know I love you so much. Because I felt death was coming, but I thought it was coming from my mom. And I talked to him a little bit later when I got home. You know, I talked to him on the phone again. And I had texted him that day. And I was so exhausted because I had so much worry for my mom and so much stress, you know, and I was just expecting a call at any minute, you know, to say that she died, you know, and like my whole body was grieving before anything even happened because I knew, I was certain. And I say that because I've always been intuitive, and on Mother's Day, which was just a couple of days before that, something told me to go see both of my parents that day. Even though it was Mother's Day, something told me to go see both of my parents because I may not get a chance to see, you know, my dad. I don't know. In my head, I was just thinking you might not get a chance to celebrate Father's Day or something, or you may not. This may be one of the last times you get to see one or both of them. And it turned out to be true. Like, I went and I saw my mom first, you know, because it was Mother's Day. And I hung out with her for a little bit, and then after that, I ended up going hanging out at my dad's, you know, for a little while. And then I went home, and then it was like when I got home, I had just had this really heavy feeling on my chest. Just a really, really dreadful, heavy feeling on my chest that just told me something's coming, something's about to happen that's either going to take, you know, one or both of them out, pretty much, you know, which my dad's health wasn't the greatest. He had COPD and diabetes, I think. He had a lot of health issues, but he had COPD. He smoked up until the end. Like, I know he did. And I went to sleep for like a couple hours that day, that night, 2 or 3 hours or something like that. And then somebody called me to tell me that my dad's neighbor called them and said that, you know, like, he took off in his truck, you know, and it was after dark. My dad didn't drive after dark. And I automatically knew it was because he was having a COPD attack. And he was driving himself to the emergency room. I had talked to my dad about this before in the past. Actually, I want to say it was not long before he died. Because he had told me, you know, why he would drive himself instead of waiting for an ambulance, because he said he did not have the time to wait for an ambulance. He would be panicking, freaking out, he can't breathe, you know. 10-15 minutes or whatever to wait on an ambulance was too long. So that's what he was doing, is he was trying to drive himself to the ER. And I think because I was like half asleep at the time, I was kind of like thinking, oh, you know, he's going to the emergency room, he'll get there, he'll be okay. Because he was fine that day. That's the thing, is he had been fine all that day. He told me he needed to get some medicine from the pharmacy because he had inhalers and everything. And he got all his medicines. I talked to him on the phone and everything. And he was fine all day. And then that night, it was about 9:30 or so. I want to say, yeah, it was like 9:30, 9:40. My sister called me to tell me Dad's been in a car accident. And I was like, what? What do you mean? Like, they didn't, you know, she didn't say he was dead. They just said he was been in a car accident and he's on his way to the emergency room. And I live like right by the hospital. Like, I could look out my window and the hospital is right there. So of course, you know, I was like, I'm on my way. And she was like, oh, okay, you know, like, I'll see you when I get there. And I was like, cool. And it was dead in there. I mean, like, wasn't a soul in that hospital except for the people behind the receptionist desk, which I thought was so odd because just the day before it was so packed and it was so busy. And then this night, you know, the next night, literally, wasn't nobody in there, wasn't nobody around. And I was trying to get information to see, how my dad was, because I thought, well, if he's in a car accident, it doesn't mean he's dead. It just means, he might need some extra support. He might need some help or something. I don't know. And my sister called me back and told me somebody had called her and told her that he did not make it off the scene alive. And I asked the people at, the receptionist desk if they could find out some information. Like, is this true? Can you tell me, give me some information? And so they went to go ask somebody or whatever. And like a few minutes later, two ladies came out and pulled me aside to the triage room, which I already knew. They don't do that to tell you good news. And my sister was on the phone. I had my phone in my hand. I wasn't thinking about it, and she was saying, ask them about dad or tell them, do something or like what's going on. And I asked them, is what she said true? Because they said dad's dead, and I said, is what she said true? And they looked at me, and then was kind of like, unfortunately, yeah. And I just collapsed to the floor right then and there. Like, I was a daddy's girl. Like, I'm a daddy's girl. I just am. And, I mean, like, I knew that he wasn't going to make it through 2025. Like, I just knew in here. But I didn't think it was going to be so soon. Like, especially, like, the day after my mom literally died and came back. Like, my dad died permanently the next night. So, that was 4 months ago. Yesterday, May 14th, 2025. My mom is doing better. Like, I really believe that as soon as my dad died, that he went to my mom and gave her whatever strength or energy he had, because my mom was circling the drain. She was going to die. Like, she was going to die. And then it was like a miracle. All of a sudden, she started getting better. Which, don't get me wrong, the hospital that she went to, both my parents had been there before multiple times, and they always did get better, but, like, the condition my mom was in was, like, there were so many fires to put out that, it was kind of like, it was literally touch and go. Like, for that week that my mom was in the hospital, the week or 2 weeks or whatever that she was there, like, especially for the first week, I was literally just on pins and needles, just waiting for a call, just for them to say, oh, she didn't make it, or, this procedure that she had to have done, that she had a reaction or something, and which, luckily she didn't. She spoke up for herself, that was the thing, is like, my mom was dying, and then it was like, I didn't even get to see her until 2 or 3 days, I want to say, after my dad died. So, but it was like, as soon as I saw her, she looked alive. Like, she was alive. I don't mean just like breathing, talking, but like, she had light in her again. She had a voice again. Whereas before she was kind of like whispering, kind of weak. Like, she didn't really have a voice. Like, she was speaking up. She was speaking for herself, She was, moving around. Like, she has life in her now. And she has a lot of trauma from around that time for herself, and to do with my dad. So she's dealing with all that right now. But, so yeah. I was watching those videos and I was listening to myself, and I was just, some of it tickled me, if I'm going to be real, because in some aspects, I still have bits and pieces of that person in me. Even though I've grown and matured in my life, I did get a different car. Like, at that time, one of those videos I was watching, I said, I had Caliber at that time. And I had Caliber for like a long time. And then eventually it got to where I couldn't drive it anymore. I couldn't drive them anymore because there was whatever was going on. I don't remember what the problem was at the time, but it got to be so bad that, like, I couldn't afford to fix it, and it was too dangerous. I didn't trust to drive the car. Like, I didn't trust it. So I ended up, giving it to my uncle. Because he kind of worked, I was like, well, it could be like a project car. He didn't have a car or nothing like that, and he's kind of like a nomad. He travels a lot, And I thought, well, he could work on it, fix it up, and then he'll have, you know, a car, or if he needs to, he can sleep in it. And then, like, a couple of weeks later, I got a tow bill in the mail from one of the local places saying that I owed storage money or something because they done picked up that car. And I went and relinquished that shit quick, fast, and in a hurry because I was like, if I wanted that car, I would have it. You know what I'm saying? So, same thing happened to my dad, too. Like, a while later, I think my dad gave my uncle a vehicle or something like that, and the same thing happened to him. He got a letter in the mail from the towing place with a bill or something like that. I was like, bro, how do you lose two cars to the towing place? Whatever. Whatever. So, anyway, after I didn't have a car for a little bit after that. It was like a few months or so. And then around tax time, I was searching, you know, and it seemed like no matter, every time I turned around, like whatever I was looking at wasn't available, or they just sold it, there, something was, whatever. And then I ended up seeing on Facebook Marketplace or something, like a friend of mine, somebody, an old coworker was selling their car, and it was like right in my price range, and I was like, bet. So that's the car I have now, that I've had for 2 years, 3, maybe going on 3 years. I'm not really sure, but her name is Ariel. She's a Sonata. You know, I've never had the same exact car twice. I've always had different cars with different colors. Interesting. Anyways, yeah, that is just something though, to look back at myself, even if it was 5, 6, 7 years ago, and just be like, wow, so much has changed in such a short amount of time. So much. But anyways, I thought I would get on here and update somewhat. I don't know why, but why not? If you watched all of this, kudos to you, because it probably wasn't all that interesting, but just in case anybody cared. Okay, bye.